as ever, I'm glad you're here on a Tuesday because we've got lots of law and order style conversations to have, not least the kick-off from Nigel Farage, there's a big piece in the Mail written by Dan Hodges, who used to be a massive Labour fan, but since I've basically, educated him, he's now become actually a more sensible individual. And he says Nigel Farage appears to be the only person right now in politics talking for Britain, speaking as if he understands what's going wrong.
Mr. Farage has a sixth political sense.
He does.
Whereby he taps in to the mood of the nation and speaks for millions.
Yeah.
And of course, how many years have you and I been having conversations about lawless Britain?
Yes.
About our streets becoming increasingly unsafe. It's kind of what I do, what I say, and what I'm talking about and writing about a lot.
A lot of the time,
And I have been doing it for some years now.
Yeah.
And we are in a dreadful state.
Yeah.
Societal collapse, I'm not necessarily sure I would have chosen those words, but increasingly lawless Britain and unsafe streets, very, very much so.
Exactly.
And yesterday was a very interesting speech from Mr. Farage.
Yeah, it was, because I think it's certainly, even if, and you'll always get naysayers who say, oh, of course, crime was a lot worse in the 70s. And you go, yeah, but it's how people feel as well. And people do feel beleaguered. They feel as if, the police are not going to help them if something does happen. They feel as though, at any moment somebody could jump them and steal their watch or steal their handbag or steal their phone. Their cars are getting nicked, their houses are getting burgled. There's a sense that there is a lawlessness about.
When people say policing and crime was worse in the 70s, crime was worse in the 70s, I was actually on the streets of Peckham in South East London.
Right.
And let me tell you, yes, of course there was crime, but the streets were, and the streets to the public felt safer. Okay, every crime was reported in the 1970s.
Yeah.
Every crime, every spot of graffiti, every bit of criminal damage, that was all reported because the public then appreciated that they would get some kind of policing response.
Right.
And they did. A home beat officer would go and look at it and try to solve it.
Yes.
And the such like. There was levels of violence, of course, but the crime, the volume of crime, the types of crime didn't exist back then. For example, people didn't have mobile phones, so they weren't getting snatched in record numbers.
Right.
There were robberies, which had that horrible name muggins attached to them.
I remember those.
But I've never liked that word.
Yeah.
There were robberies predominantly of elderly ladies having their handbags snatched and such like. There was pickpocketing on the tube, but there were squads to try and deal with that sort of thing. The public perception then was that they felt safer, and I think they were safer. Now, crime in all its guises, and let's not forget the elephant in the room that so many people don't talk about, which is fraud, which affects millions of people every year, is hugely underreported and is a pernicious crime that can blight people's lives forever. That barely gets a mention these days.
No, quite.
It just goes completely under the radar.
And the sense is, I think, that there's a kind of randomness as well now to the crime, that for some reason people are being affected by crime when they never used to be.
Yes, indeed, because of things like particularly mobile phones. But also so much crime that doesn't get reported because the police don't want to report it is harassment, for example, on public transport, in parks and the such like. That kind of behaviour, which in the past might have been dealt with by uniformed cops because it was likely to create a breach of the peace, and we could deal with people swiftly and effectively and get them on record and get them in our, not databases, we had cardboard cards in those days, but we would get to know about these people. Yeah, those kind of things now. Police rock up, and if there's not some kind of specific theft or robbery, they kind of just move on to the next incident. They're not recording these like they should do. And always be very, very suspicious of crime statistics. Because senior police officers, when they're put under pressure by the very most senior cops in policing and the Home Office and the such like to reduce crime, they will, if they get half a chance, cook the books.
No, you surprise me, Peter.
And the finest example of that, which began some years ago, was burglary. When Operation Bumblebee became a thing, a nationwide effort to tackle burglary, this is the clearest example. If somebody came home from work and found a size 10 footprint on their broken front door, but the front door had just about held, so it couldn't be kicked in, right? That crime would not be reported as attempted burglary, which clearly it was. It would be recorded as criminal damage. Hey-ho! That's not a burglary to go on the record.
So the numbers of burglaries have gone down then already?
Exactly, exactly. There's still rafts of damaged front doors where people have tried to jemmy them, screwdriver them, kick them, same with back windows and the such like, but people might have put locks on to stop that kind of thing. Oh, no, that's not an attempted burglary, that's criminal damage. Complete cooking of the books. And there's been a lot more creative kind of behaviour like that, shamefully, ever since.
I read a story the other day, and I can't remember, it was something to do with J.K. Rowling. I don't know if it was J.K. Rowling's house, but in a very nice part of Edinburgh where she lives, where there'd been a gang sort of going around because of obviously the houses being reasonably valuable, thinking there's quite valuable stuff in there, literally sort of ram-raiding these houses. And the police came round and told one of the people in the house, well, you know, maybe you should move somewhere else, because if you live in a house like this and you've got a car like that, this is the kind of thing that's going to happen. And you kind of go, well, how is that in any way reassuring and or fighting crime? You just go, oh, so just let the criminals take over then.
Any officer who says that is not fit to hold a warrant card and wear a uniform. Bin them off. That's just utterly appalling. You see, back in my day, and I know it's a long time ago and I sound like I'm swinging that blue lamp and telling old war stories, and I am, but it's relevant.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of people listening who remember those days as well.
Police officers detested criminals and detested crime being committed with a vengeance. We hated them. And home beat officers, who are now called neighbourhood or community, for example, they would take great umbrage if they came into work in the morning and there'd been a burglary on their patch. The police got cross about it, really cross about it, and consequently were motivated to try and do something about it and get those scumbags off the streets.
Because an awful lot of burglary is committed by people who live in the same neighbourhood, isn't it?
Yes,
generally speaking.
Sometimes not many burglars travel very far. Apart, of course, for the country house burglars who are after antiques and shotguns and such like, and they're very organised. And nicking those kind of teams is great, but that's not done by uniformed cops. It's done by specialist detectives who target those teams. But that whole thing about hating criminals and hating crime being committed, I think has been diluted somewhat by successive generations of police leaders with their fluffiness and their wokerati kind of attitudes. You know, let's not call them prisoners, let's call them customers. Oh, do me a favour.
Please.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly right.
And the police thinking it's like other businesses when it fundamentally is not.
Exactly right. And one of the things, we're going to listen to what Nigel Farage had to say yesterday about this. One of the things he said was he wants to take a sort of Rudolph Giuliani approach, as they did in New York. And I was in New York in the 80s, and London feels a bit like that now to me, where there was just kind of random violence and random, you know, steamings, they used to call them. People would just run through the tube, robbing everybody that was on the subway, you know. And so there are a lot of similarities. Let's have a look at what he said about this societal collapse.
We're actually facing, in many parts of our country, nothing short of societal collapse. If people are scared to go out of the shops, scared to let their kids out, that is a society that is degrading. And it's happening very, very rapidly. So I want to be absolutely clear at the start of this 6-week campaign that Reform will be the toughest party on law and order and on crime that this country has ever seen.
And I think there's a thirst for that. An awful lot of people were talking to us yesterday about his idea of sending people away to El Salvador, you know, some of the worst criminals, making room for 30,000 more criminals in this country. People want to see more people going to prison. They want to see people being punished for committing crime. Yes,
people want deterrence and people want justice to be done. And it needs to be seen to be done, exactly. Without a doubt. But, you know, I've got a broader thing to say about Mr Farage and the Reform Party, if I may. Let's look at the polls. They're galloping ahead, OK? Indisputable. So there is a clear and distinct possibility that in 4 years' time, and I know a lot can happen in 4 years' time, they may form a government. What I want is a no excuses government. And what I mean by that is there are 4 years now. Let's just take one of the points he mentioned yesterday about sending foreign prisoners back to their country of origin.
Yeah.
OK, let's think about that, because it's a great soundbite. It's very powerful, but let's look at some of the detail, which you'd expect me to do as an old-school detective.
Yeah.
Right. Say, for example, you want to send a prisoner back to Pakistan, Syria, Afghanistan, whatever that may be. You need agreements with those countries to be able to do it. You can't fly a plane over Afghanistan and drop them with a parachute.
Well, you say that, but Donald Trump more or less did that, didn't he?
Well, you know, but you can't actually do that. Right. You need some kind of agreement with them.
Yes.
There's 4 years till the next election.
Yeah.
I'd like to see reform show that they are really grown up, really sensible. Let reform start having meetings with representatives of those governments. They don't have to fly people everywhere. You can do it by Zoom. All those countries have got missions or embassies or consulates in London, in the UK. Get reform people in front of these people, or on a Zoom, and saying, look, this would be our intention.
Yeah.
Could we have an arrangement?
Yeah.
Let's, so that if they reform, get elected, they become the first no excuses government, because this government has been all about excuses.
Oh, totally.
And it's made the public sick to the back teeth of 22 billion black holes, 14 years of what we've inherited.
Yeah.
Reform have got 4 years. Be grown up. Do it properly. Get everything done so you become a no excuses government, and let the public know what you're doing. Post it on their website every day. Today, reform representatives are meeting people from here, there, everywhere. Planning, plotting, all the business people. Get it all done. Be fit for government if that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. I mean, he'll say, because he has said it and did say it on the weekend, you know, they're not the Labour Party, they haven't got thousands of people working for them, so it's a slow process. But I think the point is that at the moment he's making the right noises, and a lot of people are very encouraged by that, because let's face it, as you say, they listen to what the Labour government says and they don't believe a word of it. They listen to what the Tories say, don't believe a word of it, you know, so it's not even about no excuses anymore. Nobody wants them in anymore, right? Let's have a look at what he says about police physicality, because I want to hear what you've got to say about this.
Perhaps the biggest pledge that we would make today is to say 30,000 more police over a 5-year term of a parliament. And we will scrap all diversity, equality and inclusion roles. And we will aim for a higher and physically tougher standard of police officer on our streets.
Tougher standard police officer on our streets. This is something that comes up a lot, because people say, look, we've seen the police officers on the streets whenever they do occasionally pop into that particular role, and they don't look very scary, some of them. I'm not saying that about all of them, because you still see plenty of well-built guys that you wouldn't want to come up against, and I've seen them. Yeah. And we've seen some of the people in Epping who have been sent out there who might be a different sort of squad, who are not taking any nonsense when they get messed around with. But there is a genuine sense that, you know, we've hired too many short, small, you know, and maybe too many female police officers to be on the front lines of crime.
I have long complained that the police fitness test is not strident enough.
Yeah.
And it really isn't. They do the beep test, or they did, and it really, it was lamentable. I could have, you know, put down my cigarettes, put down my beer, popped into the pub garden and passed it.
Yeah.
Right, it really was that low. Of course, there will be huge pushback against it, because it's 2025.
Yeah.
And this ties into the whole DEI and the HR, all that kind of those departments. It ties into there. Because, of course, they will say, well, what about a woman who's coming back to work after giving birth, for example, may have put some pounds on and can't pass the beep test on her return if it's an annual kind of thing. Should there be allowances made to it? These are the kind of arguments that people put forward in this day and age, and they get listened to, and they can be an obstruction to having a taller and tougher police service. In essence, yes, I want them fitter. But of course, they don't have the residential training like we had, where you had PT, physical training exercise, virtually every day.
Right.
And we were living in that Hendon kind of compound. Yeah. So in the evening, we're playing football with our mates, as well as having to pass the swimming test, the physical training test, the rope climbs, the bench presses, all that kind of stuff. Bring that back.
Right. And
that's
nothing
a
to
really
say,
good thing.
Nothing to say that if, in the case of a woman coming back from having a baby, you know, they don't have to go out onto the streets, do they? I mean, you can give them other jobs inside the police force.
Oh, but hang on, we need them. So I think, OK, there might have to be a bit of thinking about it. All right, well, you've got a year to pass the fitness test then.
Right.
You know, but get back to that level of fitness.
Yeah.
And then, of course, officers in 2025 are going to complain, well, do I get job time, to be able to go to the gym and such like?
Yeah.
And, of course, I would manifestly, if I ruled the policing world, which I never would do, would say, no, it's an obligation upon yourself to ensure that you are fit enough to do the job.
Maybe you could do a bit of running while chasing a burglar. You know, you could try that and keep you fit, wouldn't it?
And you know what? Criminals have this rather irritating habit of running away.
I've heard that.
So it's a really good thing if you get some miles into your legs so that you can chase them.
Yeah.
It really does.
Well, how many
help.
times have we seen these ridiculous videos that from various scenarios across the country where you've got some rather, shall we say, overweight police officers not being able to even run, never mind catch the person they're trying to catch, who's literally slipped out of their grasp and disappeared.
Yep. Yeah.
You know, that's not going to be good for anyone.
No, and those standards have diminished because the benchmarks were got rid of to be more inclusive.
Yes.
But this feeds into, again, to what Mr Farage said about abolishing DEI, diversity, equality and inclusion kind of roles. These people have sown their tentacles so deep into the fabric of policing and the civil service and the education and health, you name it, they're really there. And it all started off with Blair and his political correctness back in 1997.
Right.
These people have sunk their teeth deep into every department of the civil service and public service.
Yeah.
So trying to get them out, trying to extract them,
It's going to take
trying
a
to
bit.
rein back, trying to get back to a sense of fairness, balance and proportionality is going to be one heck of a job because no government has done it.
And no one wants to do it because it's too big of a... You know, we had Dominic Cummings who came in with Boris Johnson, who was going to change the civil service forever, and he couldn't do it. He couldn't do anything. You know, he came up against the blob, and he was defeated. Whatever he may say now on Twitter, you know, he couldn't manage it. And so they're going to face a massive backlash from everybody in the public sector, whether it be the NHS, whether it be the civil service in general, local councils, which they're facing now, the police, you know. Every single aspect of public sector work will be challenging for Nigel Farage and Reform if they get in, because they'll want to change all of it.
And
because it doesn't work.
Let me give you, if I may, the finest example of that I've ever come across, OK? And Lord Frost, you can sue me if I say a word that is not the truth. I met him in a green room, OK? And he was very approachable and very nice, actually. We had a conversation.
This is the guy who negotiated Brexit, Lord Frost.
A very, very senior, you know, civil servant. The epitome of it, a man who sat really, you know, in the very highest echelons of civil service. And we had a conversation, which I started off with a bit of a kind of a dumb question, but I felt it was, I wanted to ask him this question. And I said, isn't running the country a really difficult job?
Right.
Okay, it's a simple question, but he accepted the spirit in which I was asking it, because I wanted to elicit things from him.
Asking stupid questions is a great way to get things out of people.
Yeah, and he said, yes, it is. He said, it is. He said, and trying to get things done can be very difficult. He said, all the more reason why you should keep the politicians well away from it. Now, there you go.
Yeah.
Straight out of the horse's mouth, verbatim, that was his reply to me.
Yeah.
So there you have it. There's an indicator of the kind of job that any government would have in extracting or diminishing the power, the influence of civil service and other public servants like the DEI departments in police services, how to lower their grip, their grasp, loosen it, that they've got.
Absolutely right. Listen, we've got loads more to do. I know you want to talk about a story about mental health in the police as well, which we're going to come to in a moment. Also, we're going to be playing you a clip of Keir Starmer yesterday at the Liaison Committee, where he was asked a question, a very simple question, and he completely messed it up. He made himself look a right plonker, quite frankly. Peter Bleksley's here, of course, talking a great deal of common sense about whether or not we have a societal collapse going on. He says it's not quite as bad as that. A lot of people say we can get this back, but the people that want to get it back are obviously reform. The Labour government doesn't seem to have a clue how to get anything back, and that's really going to be illustrated by this clip here. Keir Starmer, as is the wont of the Prime Minister, appears in front of a committee every so often. It's called the Liaison Committee, which is made up of all the heads of other select committees in Parliament. And I think this was Meg Hillier, was it not, who's from the Audit Commission, or the Audit Committee. She was asking him questions about rehousing of illegal migrants and others. Have a look.
Just a pinpoint before. What other accommodation precisely are you planning to take over to provide temporary accommodation for families?
Oh, there's lots of housing in many local authorities that can be used, and we're identifying where it can be used. But I mean, look.
Sorry, can you give us? Have you got any examples you can give us?
No, but I'll write in and give you details.
Because I could say certainly in a number of our local authorities, I'm already picking up from around the table, there isn't a lot of spare housing available. If there were, councils would be able to be dealing with it by now.
Well, exactly.
Well, exactly. So when he says, well, exactly, he agrees with her that there isn't any space after just having said that there is a load of space. It's bizarre.
Lots of housing in many local authorities.
Yes.
What utter baloney.
Yeah. Rubbish, right?
Complete nonsense.
And then he can't say where they are, but he'll write in and give you some tips for it once he's made them up.
Yeah, if there was lots of housing in local authorities, why are these huge companies with government contracts reaching out to landlords and offering 5-year deals, fixed deals on their rent, doing complete refurbs, all repairs, all that kind of stuff, offering huge incentives to landlords if there was all this property in local authorities available?
And if there
what
were,
nonsense.
why there are, I think 1.5 million people is the number on waiting lists to try and get social housing in this country, and all manner of difficulties that you have because quite a lot of these illegal migrants are coming in and jump in the queue. And so the one thing there's a shortage of is an awful lot of council housing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And everybody knows that.
And he sits there and tells a barefaced untruth. But of course, you see, they've said that they will end this asylum seekers and illegal migrants in hotels by 2029. And how are they going to do that?
I don't know.
By parachuting everybody into all these communities the length and breadth of the country. Because as far as they're concerned, if they get a load of them out, remember, these people who we don't know who they are, where they've come from, what their backgrounds are or what their intentions are, if they parachute all of those into local communities rather than having them in hotels, the problem is not going to go away.
It won't go
away.
away.
Unacceptable behaviour from some of these people is going to continue. And in fact, the whole situation might be made worse because we won't know where they're living.
No, it will be made a lot worse. Robert Jenrick said this: there are 1.3 million people on social housing waiting lists in England alone, but Keir Starmer believes there's lots of housing spare. That is madness. Those are his words. I think people were watching that and kind of incredulous because he looks like he's been caught out in a lie, even as he says it. You can see in his face, he's kind of going, exactly, when they say there isn't any housing. So it can't be both things, surely.
No, of course
it's either
it can't.
there's a lot of housing, or he agrees with Meg Hillier that there isn't any.
Of course it can't.
But he says the same. He says the two opposite things in the space of about 30 seconds.
That's because he's a buffoon.
It's bizarre, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
But don't worry, because they've got a new plan. It's just been handed to me, hot off the press, right? First people smuggling sanctions to be announced this week in a new strategy. So I can only assume from this new strategy that smashing the gangs was the old strategy, and we're not going to be doing that anymore. So what we're going to be doing now is gang leaders, corrupt officials and companies selling boat equipment will be named this week as the first targets of new government sanctions against people smuggling. The financial action, which the government says is a world first, is aimed at tackling illegal immigration to the UK and is central to Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer's plan to disrupt the English Channel crossings by smashing the gangs that are organising them. Sorry,
but you see,
for laughing.
But you see what it is now, okay, there will be a new Logan. It'll be naming the gangs, smashing.
Very good.
See?
Yeah,
that's
I see how you did that.
This is a smashing idea to name the gangs. Not smash them.
They're so deluded, right? They've got in this statement by the government early this month, Keir Starmer signed a one-in, one-out deal with France. No, he didn't. He signed a 17-in, one-out deal with France so that we could get some more asylum seekers in rather than getting rid of more of them out.
I'll spare you my reworked version of the Okie Kokie this morning.
Yes,
I did that a couple
was
of
very
weeks
good.
ago.
We can retread that.
It's kind of, well, what is going on? This problem that is so visual. Do you know, oh, by the way, just to cheer everybody up this morning, sorry, over 1,000 in the last 4 days,
yes.
okay? Over 1,000.
And the weather hasn't been great either, so that'll go up, won't it?
Yeah, in the last 4 days, it's utterly astonishing. And of course, this is a very visceral and visual representation of our country not being protected.
Yes.
But once again, I make no apologies for highlighting to people, this is only, relatively speaking, in numbers terms, a small part of the migration issue.
Yeah.
We've got all the visa abusers.
Yeah.
We've got all those visa people who brought over the grannies from Ghana, the nannies from Nigeria, the disabled kids, and all those kind of people who are not ever going to contribute to this country and only ever be a drain of it.
Exactly.
And we've got no money and no one's getting a grip.
And we've also got now information that there's been a whole load of people coming in from Pakistan, which is now reaching, Epic reports as the #1 country where people come from to come to Britain, right? Because many of them come on a visa and they overstay the visa and then they claim asylum. So they're not even coming on the small boats, even though some of them now are. But we also see, the Telegraph got a story this morning saying basically that bogus asylum seekers are coming in on forged visas, which they're basically buying somewhere in the middle of Europe, which gets them into Europe and then into Britain.
Yeah, there you go.
So,
there you go.
And in The Sun this morning, page 9, a Turkish man alleged to have run a meet and greet service for boat migrants has been arrested by the cops. Well done to you. Up in Tottenham in North London, officers stormed a home at 6:25 a.m, nicked a 35-year-old who was wearing a Hugo Boss T-shirt and North Face tracksuit. He's brought out handcuffed and led to a police van. They've covered his face up, obviously, because he'll face charges. But imagine that, a meet and greet officer. It's a bit like going on a package holiday, isn't it?
Yeah. And all right, well done for nicking him, but I will be enthused once he's charged.
Yes.
Nicking people is actually easy.
Yeah.
Charging and convicting them takes a bit more work.
Yeah.
Let's wait and see. Is he going to be charged? Get him on the sheet, get him in front of a court, get him sentenced. Then I'll have reasons to be cheerful. But there's hundreds of them.
Yeah.
This is on an unprecedented scale, and it's an absolute nonsense, and no wonder people are so fed up.
And this is why people are getting worked up in places like Epping Forest, where that Bell Hotel is going to be the subject of a demonstration again at the weekend, probably more. We're going to be speaking to one of the people who was at the demo the other day. You know, like all of these things, it starts off as a very peaceful demonstration, and most of the people involved are peacefully demonstrating, but then darkness falls and it takes on a slightly different look, you know. Meanwhile, up in Diss, we had a call yesterday from a woman in Diss up in Norfolk who said, we've got the same problem here. We had an asylum hotel which was being used to house families. They've all been moved out and now it's just full of young men. And so they were also out demonstrating. And that's going to start happening all over the country.
If contagion spreads.
Yeah, and it will.
Over these hotels, and these demonstrations are seen the length and breadth of the country, then it's going to be very interesting.
Yeah.
But on that, it would be remiss of me not to say, and I'm sure that your audience are far too bright to do any of this nonsense, but if you know someone who's thinking of throwing a punch or throwing a brick or pulling off a wing mirror of a police van, please tell them not to do it, because it's utterly idiotic and it doesn't benefit anybody's cause.
It also harms the case. It also harms
really
the case.
does.
Yeah, exactly right. A couple of statistics for you. 1,030 migrants in the last 6 days, as you were saying. Channel migrants since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister, 46,776. Migrant numbers for 25 only, 23,534, which I think is a record. And Channel arrivals for June, 5,610. I mean, these are ridiculous numbers, and they're not going anywhere other than up, because more and more of these people, particularly if they think there's going to be some kind of crackdown, they're going to come even quicker, aren't they?
Yep. And the really unpalatable truth is that a number of these people, a percentage of these people, have been arrested, charged and convicted of crimes.
Yeah.
And the stats that get released are only the ones that have been caught, remember?
Yeah, of course.
Okay? And what we do know is that a lot of the more a lot of the stuff like harassment, for example, is not getting recorded as crimes.
No.
And people are not being arrested for that when they actually should be.
Yeah, exactly right. We're going to come back to this number of Metropolitan Police officers signed off due to mental health issues. We are going to come back to that. We're running a bit late. We'll do it. Coming up shortly, 6:38. We talked earlier about the NHS strikes. We'll come back to those. They will cost £87 million plus £250,000 appointments that will go south. The unions are also saying that they want £6,000 for weekend consultant cover for somebody just to work Saturday and Sunday, so £3,000 a day to cover for their own people who are going out on strike. And they've also said that it will actually harm patients in the long run. So thanks very much indeed. These are doctors who have signed a Hippocratic oath to do no harm.
We actually know, because coroners have recorded verdicts proving this, patients have died as a result of previous doctors' strikes. That is the irrefutable and very unfortunate truth.
Yeah.
I would suggest that legislation needs to be brought in saying that doctors cannot strike.
I would go along
Stick them
with
in the same bracket as police.
Yeah.
The police can't strike because lives would be lost and there'd be chaos. Doctors should not be able to strike because lives are being lost.
Yes, absolutely right. Speaking of which, let's go back to that Metropolitan Police story that you wanted to mention. A record number of 2,000 Metropolitan Police officers signed off currently due to mental health issues.
Yeah, it's a catastrophe, and it's also replicated with about 1,000 at Greater Manchester Police and I think 1,000 or so at West Midlands Police. We've got a mental health crisis amongst police officers. Now, they do a very difficult job, and in all likelihood, if you have a full kind of police career, if you do 30, 35 years, then you will be exposed to hundreds of deeply traumatic incidents.
Sure.
In all likelihood, if you spend any amount of time on the front line in one of our big cities, you will quite likely be knelt over a child or a young adult trying to save their life by pinching arteries and
It's
putting
been stabbed for
things on wounds and trying to stem bleeding and horrendous things. The violence they will face. I exposed a story last week of 2 Met police officers who went to a domestic and ended up being very seriously assaulted. 2 female officers, one multiple face fractures, spent a long time in hospital, the other one with a broken nose. It's a tough job, and it needs tough people to do it. And feeding back to what Mr Farage says, let's toughen up the police. But yes, this mental health crisis is shocking. So many officers off sick. It's 2025, so I'm not going to say, you know, some clumsy statement from yesteryear like man up, because that would be inappropriate. That's not what I'm saying to police officers. What I'm saying to police chiefs is there needs to be some kind of system in place whereby officers' welfare is taken care of. But before that, train them up properly. Train them as to what is to be expected. Select them properly and train them properly, and then
prepare them properly,
and prepare them. All of the
because
above.
maybe that's the issue. Maybe they're not being properly prepared for what they're about to see on a daily basis or on a weekly basis or whatever it is, you know.
Quite possibly, and of course the levels of violence that they are subjected to and that they experience in terms of victims is way beyond what I did back in my day. I'm not going to deny that. But of course, we did face murder and unpleasantness, and we got assaulted, and I got stabbed, and, you know, guns pulled on me. All that kind of stuff that happens in policing. But of course, the culture was very different in so much as at the end of one of those shifts, we'd probably go to the pub. And we'd all be there for each other. And we'd have a natter. And be, you all right, mate? Yeah, okay. You know, okay. Yeah, great, I'm fine. Or if you're not, go on in, what's the problem? Yeah, well, you know, and it could be home life, work life, this, that and the other. We were there for each other collectively as a team. And I think police leaders over the years have deliberately tried to dismantle that post-work togetherness.
Yes, because it's become something that they fear, because they think that people might be excluded from it. Therefore, it might be bad for morale overall. It's a very complicated thing, isn't it? Journalism was very much the same. You know, in my day of journalism, you never knew you could go out on the street. You know, I used to get in car chases. I had knives pulled on me. I mean, you just didn't know what was going to happen. And friends of mine got killed. Friends of mine got blown up in Afghanistan. You know, nobody tells you how to deal with that when you don't go into your training. They don't go, this is what happens if one of your mates gets killed, or, you know, somebody dies in a car crash and chasing something. You know what I mean? It's just like, you know, when I was reading the horrible, ghastly Bulger details, you know, those kinds of things. You can't prepare for that. You just have to deal with it. Speaking of which, let me ask you about the Orgreave inquiry, because we didn't really get to this yesterday. I was going to. This is yet another Labour inquiry they've started up. 1984 this happened, and it's all about the police and how they behaved dealing with the miners' strike. It seems to me to be, you know, pointless to be getting involved in this, considering all the stuff we've got to deal with now.
Well, I was a detective back in the days of the miners' strike, and I was working at Kensington Police Station, and invariably on a Friday in the afternoon, the sort of Green Goddess sort of coaches would line up in Earls Court Road, and the uniformed officers would pile onto those coaches with their overnight bags, and they were going to Leeds or Yorkshire or Nottinghamshire, Orgreave, you know, somewhere like that, to go into battle with the miners.
It was a battle, wasn't it?
Oh, it certainly was. And I used to see them getting on those buses with glee written all over their faces. They were properly up for a tear-up. And do you know what? I was very glad that I wasn't joining them, because I'd been at a major kind of tear-up, the Brixton riots of 1981, which was particularly unpleasant when you are in that level of confrontation with the public. You know, I joined to kind of serve the public and help them out by locking up criminals. I didn't really want to have a large-scale war with them. I can see why people want this inquiry all these years later, because quite frankly, what some of the police did up there, not necessarily while they were in uniform, by the way, after they'd finished their day shifts, created division in these communities. It sowed division. There was affairs, they were drinking in pubs, there was people, you know, it caused a lot of hurt up there. And I can understand why those communities still to this day remain very, very cheesed off with everything that happened.
Well, again, the question is, you know, how much can the government fix? My view would be, and I agree with everything you just said, however, have they got the bandwidth to do it? Probably not. You know, how many, you know, inquiry? We still haven't heard about the grooming gangs inquiry. I mean, that's a little bit more important to me than this is, and I think to most people it would be. You know, you can't do an investigation into absolutely everything that went wrong in, you know,
in everything forever.
Some love coming in for you. Peter, the Home Secretary, says Anne. Stephen says, morning, Mike. Tuesday's one of my favourite show days as Peter Bleksley is a guest. Always insightful with a touch of humour. Thank you, gentlemen, for kick-starting my day. And Blondie says, put him in charge of the police. He'll sort them out. You should get them in. They should get him in as an advisor. He knows what he's talking about. And I mean, a lot of people coming up with that. Here's one from Marina Chris in Chichester Marina. I beg your pardon. Already another great show. Keep up the great work. I have a question regarding these alleged asylum seekers. I mean, irregular immigrants. No, illegal. How are they even considered for asylum when we have no idea who the hell they are or where they are from? It's a joke. We are a joke. I'm leaving. Well, if he's at the Chichester Marina, he might have a boat to jump on. You go the other way. You might well see if anybody's coming in from France as well while you're at it. But it's true, isn't it? You know, all this kind of, you know, these ridiculous kind of arcane rules that we're using that were formulated after the Second World War, that you must be able to claim asylum in a safe country so that you're not chased down the road by horrible Nazi people in uniforms. You know, it doesn't apply now. No. You know, these people are coming here seeking asylum, having already been in several safe countries, and it's an old, retreaded argument, I know, but they shouldn't be doing it.
And I love the fact that he's not fallen into the trap of this irregular.
No.
Please call it illegal, because the Migration Act of 2023 says that coming to the UK through an unsafe route is actually a criminal offence. So it's illegal.
Right.
Call it what it is.
You won't be surprised to know that in that story about the new crackdown, David Lammy calls them irregular.
Of course he will.
Yeah.
Because it's all part of the woke-arati
Talking of
lunatic
wokerati,
left.
front page of the Sun today, Woke's the story. This is a good one. You know, they've been doing all these big shows up in Heaton Park in Manchester, which look fantastic, by the way. I never did get a ticket, but I wasn't that bothered. But now, having seen them, you kind of think, actually, I'd quite like to see that.
Yeah.
But apparently loads of ticketless Oasis fans who couldn't get into the show and who can't get over the fence have been forming themselves on this place called Gallagher Hill, they're now calling it. And apparently the local council were getting a bit miffed because they were damaging the trees.
But Liam and Noel printed up 1,000 T-shirts, bless them, and handed them out with Gallagher Hill across the front,
which is great,
using the Oasis font. Absolutely brilliant. I've got to tell you, if these two brothers can get it back together and sort it out and bring joy to people, what about Will and Harry, eh?
Well, I mean, that's now you're pushing the boundaries. I mean, for heaven's sake, I was trying to get through without mentioning the royal family. I'll tell you what I do want to talk about. There's a great story on page 23 of The Sun. Some of the other papers have got it as well. And this comes hot on the heels, by the way, of that ridiculous decision the other day. We made them plank of the week, actually. I think it was Bilton School up in Rugby, who wouldn't let the little girl who was 12 go into her cultural day wearing a Union Jack dress, right? This is something similar. And Dad gets dressed up as a gorilla for his daughter's last day at school. I think she's 7. And he gets a warning letter from the school saying it's a safeguarding issue.
It's a key fundamental of parenting that you are allowed to embarrass your kids, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's one of the joys of parenting, isn't it? So they roll their eyes and tut at you and go, "Oh, Dad, oh, Mum,"
of course.
you know.
It's got to be done.
Don't do that. Yeah, it's an absolute given.
And he says that last year he did the same thing, and he turned up with a horse's head on his head.
Yeah.
So he's clearly quite a funny guy, and he's got a lovely relationship with his daughter. He's a horse dentist and a farmer. And he said so for her last day at Hertford Vale Primary School in North Yorkshire on Friday. He said it's a little village school. So there's a picture of him wearing this gorilla suit. I'm already laughing at it. I just think it's really funny.
Chris Napthine, forgive me if I've got your pronunciation of your name wrong, Chris. He looks exactly like the sort of bloke I'd like to have a pint with.
Yeah, definitely.
He's clearly got a sense of humour, loves his family, and Addie, his 7-year-old daughter, you know, I'm sure she was mortified by her dad in a gorilla suit.
Who's that over there? Your dad's in a gorilla suit.
But it's a laugh, you know?
Yeah.
And even if it spooks some of the younger kids, isn't also frightening kids a very good thing to do. It's why you take them to the dungeons and other places. It's why you go on the ghost train, if they still exist. Because being scared is a bit of a laugh, and it's part of growing up.
Also, are you sure? I mean, the letter that he got says, please do not come into school in a costume or a mask. This is a serious safeguarding issue. It has also upset some of the children and caused concern for adults. Really? Has it? Or are they just saying that?
What utter cobblers.
I know.
Yeah.
It is. Cobblers is exactly what it is. Quite right too. Let's move to the Telegraph. Front page of the Telegraph. Davos leader rigged data to make Brexit look like a failure. Now, the thing I like about this story is this is about Klaus Schwab, who I used to get calls about when I did an overnight show years ago on TalkSport, because all these conspiracy theorists would ring in and say, you know, the World Economic Forum is running the world. Do you not know that these people are going to change our lives forever? It turns out this bloke has not only been accused of, shall we say, misappropriating some funds, but he's also apparently been inappropriate with some of the younger members of the World Economic Forum. So he's not so much as a globalist, you know, kind of, you know, ambassador and entity for running the world. He's just another dirty old git.
Yeah.
Basically.
Who's cooked the books.
Who's cooked the books.
Yeah, for his own political aims.
Yeah. And he's not actually the master of the universe at all.
Yeah.
So there we go. There we have it. In the 2017-18 report from the WEF, right, after Brexit had been voted upon, the British economy had actually gone up in terms of how successful it was. Yeah. And it was due to jump, I think, from 5th place up to 4th place.
7th, I think, to 4th.
7th to 4th, and instead he interfered there and said, this can't be good, because if you make Brexit look good, that's going to be bad for us. So he bumped them down to 8th.
Yep. And Nigel Farage has come up with a wonderful quote here, right? Front page of the Telegraph. Nigel Farage, the leader of Reform UK, said, every conspiracy theory about Klaus Schwab now turns out to be true. He is a dangerous globalist manipulator.
Yeah, well, I mean, he can say that, and he would say that, but I mean, I have to say, he just looks like another stupid old git, to be honest. But countries have gone to sort of bend the knee in his favour for years and years and years. So how stupid does it make them all look?
Yeah, exactly.
He would organise Davos every year, and people that used to go to Davos that I know very well said the problem with Davos was once the Russians stopped going, it stopped being any fun. Because the Russians were banned, obviously, after what happened in Ukraine. Yeah. So there's that. Also, one for the people wishing to take their children on a staycation. Dozens of Britain's beaches have been blighted by sewage spills just as the school summer holidays begin. Swimmers are being urged to think carefully before entering the water. I wouldn't so much think carefully as just have a look at it. See what's going on in there. Heavy rain over the weekend set off storm overflows. And this is, of course, the day after Keir Starmer said he was fixing the water system, which he's not doing.
And he had Steve Reed, his Environment Minister, Sunday doing all the news channels in the morning. And then yesterday announcing that they're scrapping Ofwat to develop some new kind of super regulator that might actually do the job.
Right.
But isn't it a total scandal and a stain on this great nation that when it doesn't rain, we haven't got enough water, apparently.
Well, we've got a hosepipe ban in Kent now.
Yeah, exactly. So you can't water your plants.
Right.
And then when it does rain, they pour tons and tons of sewage into our rivers and seas.
It's shocking.
Shame on these people.
It really is awful.
How do they sleep at night, the people who run these companies?
I know. It's absolutely disgusting. It really is. And
they should be sleeping in a cell at night. That's how they should be sleeping.
Yeah, I know. Absolutely shocking. Now, talking of Nigel Farage, the one clip we haven't seen yet is him talking about the Epping protests, which have been going on for the last few days, really, and will probably continue for the next few days. Here's what he had to say.
On Epping, I don't think anybody in London even understands just how close we are to civil disobedience on a vast scale in this country, and I regret saying that. Of course, there were some bad eggs that turned up at Epping. Don't underestimate the simmering anger and disgust that there is in this country that we are letting in every week, in fact, some days, many hundreds of undocumented young males, many of whom come from cultures in which women and young girls are not even treated as second-class citizens. So the answer is yes, I do understand the genuine upset and anger. And I'll bet you that most of the people outside that hotel in Epping weren't far right or far left or anything like that. They were just genuinely concerned families.
And that, again, is why Nigel Farage speaks for an awful lot of people in this country, because he's the only one that really does.
Bang on the money.
Yeah. Exactly.
Every word he said, absolutely spot on. There are so many deep, deep concerns that so many people have about this.
Yeah.
And it cuts across the wider thing about the general malaise, the decline of this nation, the dilution of what Britain used to be.
Yeah.
You know, in the 80s, when we were going through school or at work, and during all that period, we were taught to love thy neighbour wherever they came from, and we bought into that.
And we did,
you know, black people and brown people became our mates.
Yeah.
We bought into all of that because we felt that there was an element of it being kind of managed.
And,
you know what I mean?
And also being very British, and it was fine. But now it's out of control, and people are really, really angry about it, and that's the simple truth, I'm afraid. You can't get around it.